I've now finished The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. So I'm surprised. I thought this was a more recent book because I've heard so much about it, but it came out in 2006, I think, which is like my peak sort of favorite time of fantasy writing is from 2000 to 2010. That could just be my age and like what I grew up with, but so I'm surprised this one slipped me by. It was a very enjoyable read, very easy to read, very fun to read, very good, fun world, good fun book. The narrative is like super simple, basic, not basic. Well, yeah, basic. It's a heist novel. So it's the narrative plot is the same as every heist novel ever, or book or movie or whatever, and that's not a bad thing. The sort of wrappings and the world that that surrounds it is the interesting part. But I mean, like, it's literally an orphan boy is raised, lives on the streets, is sort of raised as a thief, makes other friends, lives in a gang with other kids. They steal stuff. He grows up. They get ambitious. They make this great plan. They're gonna pull the heist of the century and rob this magnificently rich nobleman. The plan's going great, but there's some little hiccups. But they overcome that and they keep going. And then it all goes wrong, and their hideout gets sacked and destroyed, and half the gang gets killed, and he loses his friends, but he's still got his one best friend left, and now they have no resources and nothing but their wits about and their skills on the streets, and they gotta go back for one last attempt to get the money and save the day, and of course it ends with a great big feast in a big nobleman's area, and then it ends in a fight, and of course he chooses to save people rather than get the money because it's not about the money. But then he's still a con man, and he still manages to work his way and trick everyone in the end and get exactly what he wants and escape into the sunset. And I mean, that sort of narrative plot that's every sort of heist novel, right? No, I've got notes. I forgot to get my notes. My notes. Because I want to talk about the world. Because like I said, the narrative was kind of basic. I mean, it's his debut novel, and for his debut novel, it's written expertly. I want to talk about what I think of as a sort of zipper method of storytelling, which, bear with me, this is going to be a stretch, but for some reason all I can think of is a zipper. Like, a zipper's got two sides that sort of start to interlock and build on each other, and as they build on each other, one side and then another side and then another side, it like zips up together. He does this a lot, especially in the first sort of section where he sort of two sides of the zipper being the present and the past. So he'll tell us a block, and then there'll be some backstory to that, and then there'll be another story, and we'll be like, oh no, what's happening? But then we'll get the backstory to fill in what happened. And he sort of does this throughout the whole novel, much like other writers would do, where they like, we have sort of the main sort of storyline when he's a young adult doing this great big heist, but we keep getting flashbacks to him as a child, and we learn more about how he came to be in the position he is in now. But at the first of the novel, there's a lot of, like, not just flashbacks to his childhood, but flashbacks within sort of the main storyline. Like, for example, when they are going to see when the Midnighters meet the Selvaras, and you're like, and they explain the whole plot of John or Locke's game, and you're like, oh no, how did they figure it out? And then the next, like, page is immediately going back like 12 hours to Locke dressing up as a Midnighter because he's the one who actually did, and just stuff like that, where it's a bit of misdirection in the writing, but it zips. I'm gonna stick with the zipper thing. It zips up very nicely. Let me just consult my notes. Yeah, so I want to talk about the world, because when you're starting a new fantasy world, it's always interesting. Like, your first thing you're thinking about is magic system, sort of time period, races, etc. Um, and another thing about his writing and world building is that he doesn't have a lot of exposition at the first. He starts out very small, and as different parts of the world become relevant to the story, he'll have short, sort of these weird micro chapters of exposition explaining the historical context of these characters or these events or these places that can sort of clear things up for you. But these are spaced out throughout the entire novel. So you're not just thrown into a world that you're just assumed to know. Sorry, Steve. You're not sort of given all the exposition up front and explained as you go. It's built upon itself, and you're only told what you need to know, and the little bits that you do tell expand on the world, and it's great. It's just great. So the world is very much the 17th century Venice is the city of Camor, I'd say. I mean, it's got canals. They all have sort of Italian-like accents. There's a place to the north where they speak in a language that seems very harsh, and they're much paler skinned, which is like, to me, Austria or Germany. Even the city of Camor, it once was part of a great empire that was shattered by the barbarians from the north and the Magi from the east. And this great empire used to have a different language which they share a few lines from, and it's literally like fake Latin. So it's very much Italy in I'd say 17th century, just from the vibe of the clothing and stuff. But there's no gunpowder, which is good. I don't like gunpowder. And interestingly, I didn't think there was any magic, which I really liked. Like the first half of the book, like I said, how he expands on the world building. The first half of the book, there's no mention of any magic. There is alchemy, but in this, alchemy seems to be more of a science. It's used as sort of their way of having lights. Instead of electric lights or candles, they have these alchemical globes. And then there's lots of sort of genetic engineering alchemy in botany. And so there's this alchemy, which is kind of magical, but it seems much more science and technology based, in that it is studied and understood. It's not some sort of mystical, je ne sais quoi, supernatural magic. It's just alchemy. But there is magic. But it is so tightly controlled. There seems to be only a few hundred people that can use magic. They are the Bons Magi, the Bons Magi. They all live in this one city-state where they have a monopoly on magic, and they kill anyone else who can use magic. And in order to use their services, it costs such an exorbitant fee that rulers of other states can only afford them for a very short period of time. So basically, magic is not really a thing in this world. It is, but it's so hard to access that it isn't, sort of thing. Except for, of course, the main antagonist in this book has his pet Bonds Mage. So yeah, think 17th century Venice, Canal Islands, port trading center, rife with crime, ruled by a duke and nobles who live in these 5 glass towers that are like skyscrapers, these elder glass towers, which I'll talk about the Eldrin. There's also the criminal underlord who also rules part of the city. So they have the duke who rules the nobles and ostensibly the whole city, but he also has this Kappa Barsavi, this criminal underlord leader. And there's the secret peace between the duke, the nobles, and the police force, the Yellow Jackets, and the underworld, so that they don't interfere with one another. And the criminals only prey on the merchants and the poor and the common folk, which is an important plot element. So yeah, alchemy is basically science, but different. Provides light, poisons, medicines, genetic engineering. Magic's very rare and controlled. There's also exotic and large and dangerous animals, like these weird big spiders that can swim, and also sort of mysterious sea creatures and lots of sharks. I guess sharks aren't really magical, but there's sharks. But the Eldrin I want to talk about, because the city's sort of built on the ruins of a previous civilization, one that's described as alien, and that doesn't mean from another planet, but it's non-human. So I'm thinking elves right away, right? And it said that they lived 1,000 years ago, which doesn't seem that long, but it's before humans settled there. They were magical because the Bonds Magi and the Eldrin are compared at one point, so they must have had some sort of magic. But most of what we see of them is these elder glass structures. So the whole city is sort of built on the ruins of these elder glass structures. And I say ruins even though these things are sort of indestructible, and they have remained and been built around and used by humans. So these 5 sort of skyscrapers are made of them that the highest nobles in the Duke live in. Lots of bridges across the canals are made of them. Lots of tunnels throughout the city are made of them. Interestingly, the tunnels also said they found tons and tons of these cables that they use for different things, and for some reason I'm thinking, oh, they're like fiberglass cables for their not Wi-Fi, but their internet or communications. But I don't know about that. But this elder glass is indestructible. It seems to have some sort of temperature regulation ability. Like it can be very cool in an elder glass place when it shouldn't be, or very hot, vice versa. But it also has some weird sort of light absorption properties, so that at the end of the day when the sun sets, there is another time period. The first part of night is called false light, because all the elder glass structures in the city start to glow and give off this light that sort of allows people to see up until, I don't know how, I assume like midnight. Around midnight it sort of cuts off, and then it's like true night, so the criminals can go out and do their thing. But I imagine that's the Eldrin sort of did that on purpose so that their city would have light in the evening, because like we need light in the evenings. Yeah, so that's the Eldrin. I'd like to get into more of them. Maybe we will in the other books, but for now it's very much, they're mysterious. They have left mysterious things that we don't know where they've gone, but they are gone. We don't know what they are. I'm thinking elves because it's a fantasy book. So to go through the plot, I kind of laid out the very basic narrative structure, but just to go through the 4 books. There are 4 books. Yes, including a prologue. So the prologue, we have Locke, our main character. Speaking of which, his best friend's John, or is it Jean? But I was trying to find, like, is it called John Locke for a reason? But I'm trying to, like, there's not really anything about empiricism or tabula rasa unless it's that the thief maker takes these boys in chains and remakes them as blank slates. I don't know. I see John and Locke and I think John Locke, but I don't think that's intentional, unless I totally missed it. So Locke, orphan. Importantly, he saw his mother die, but he didn't see his father die, and he didn't really. He's like, my father was a sailor, I think. So his father's still out there. So this whole book, I'm waiting for his father to show up. I'm thinking maybe the bad guy's his father or something crazy like that. Didn't happen. So that must be a future book thing. So he's recruited by this guy, the thief maker, as a 5-year-old orphan, raised among other kids to be a thief, but he is sort of too ambitious. He breaks the secret peace. He steals from the police officers, which you're not supposed to do. He fakes being having the plague and enters an inn or a tavern, and everyone freaks out, and it causes the tavern to be burned to the ground and a mass riot and hundreds of people to be killed. He has there's this bully, this older kid that hangs with him. So he steals one of the most expensive denominations of coin, hides it in this guy's room, and then tells the thief maker, hey, this older boy, yeah, he was talking to the guards and they've been paying him or something. And when the thief maker finds the coin, he kills the boy and the boy's friend. And then it's revealed that this was all Locke setting it up. So then the thief maker's like, I gotta get rid of this boy or kill him myself. He has too much trouble. So he sells him to Chains, this sort of priest of, ostensibly, this religion that looks after the lost and orphans and whatnot. But that's just a front. He's really one of the right people, capital RP, one of the criminals of this city, and he sort of worships a 13th god. There's only 12 gods, but there's actually 13, which is like the criminal's god. Anyway, so Locke gets raised there with these two twins, Callo and Galdo, Senza, the last name is, and eventually they had another boy, Jean, probably Jean. It's spelled in the French way, and Italy's closer to France than England. Anyways, yeah. So he's a bigger guy. He gets trained by the Duke's personal swordsmaster because he was friends with Chains. They grew up together and served in the army together, whatever. So John is very much the muscle of the organization, but he's not stupid. He loves to read. He's a huge reader, and he's really good at math. He was from a merchant's family, so he was really good at math and stuff you would need to be good at to be a merchant. Locke, on the other hand, is sort of the mastermind of the operation. It's neat because he's not your typical early 20s protagonist where he's sort of dashing and good looking and well built but slim and also like great with a sword and like a dead shot with a crossbow. No, he's actually described as like this most plain looking average middle sliders guy there can be, which suits him because he means he can blend into just about anything. He's described as ugly by one of the characters, and he is super skinny. He's like emaciated skinny. But his thing is his costumes and acting, and he's a master of disguise is what he is. He can blend in to any role he needs to be, and that's what these kids have been training with Chains, this priest, this whole time. Is they go out to different priesthoods and they live with them for a bit. Sometimes they go to farms outside of the city, and they experience as much different lives as they can. They learn as much different languages as they can, different classes of society, so that they can blend in anywhere to suit their thieving needs. And when I say thieving, they're not like pickpocketing or breaking into houses. They are doing like major scams and scamming people out of money. So the prologue's just a setup, and we flash back to more of their history growing up throughout the whole book. The first book is Ambition. It's telling the sort of the setup of this new game. They always call it a game. So the gang is called the Gentleman Bastards. Chain is dead at this point. We never find out in this book how Chains died. I thought there would be a flashback to it. Maybe it was just old age. But at this point, Locke is the garista, the head of the gang, and they have another kid, Bug, who's like this 12-year-old little guy who's also joined them. So their plan is to rob this guy Don Salvara. Don being like a nobleman's title, like Lord or Sir or what have you. So Locke's plan is to play the role of a merchant from this other city. A merchant from the family who has like the best brewing facility and creates the most expensive alcohol, whatever, brandy I think it is. And he's saying like there's going to be a civil war up north, which is true, and all of our vines are going to be destroyed. So all of the stuff we have aging now, that's the only product that's going to be on the market for the next 10 or 20 years or longer. So we need help from this city to get it out of the city that's about to fall into chaos, and whoever can help us transport it will split the proceeds of the sale of this stuff that's going to be so expensive. So Don Salvar is like, this is great, yes, sign me up. Starts writing checks, giving Locke checks, like go bribe the people, go buy the boats, go get the provisions, do whatever you can to get this stuff, and we're all going to be rich. And of course, Locke's taking these checks saying thanks and just making bank, cashing them in, and dumping them into his money pit. They've got like at the end of this book, they have 45,000 crowns, which is roughly the same fortune that the guy they're robbing had before they started robbing him. So they have as much money as one of the like upper nobles of this city. From all of their schemes and stuff. So it's interesting. Usually um, you would sort of build up the legend of this guy until he gets the big score and then becomes super rich. But this one kind of starts out with them being super, super rich and successful. So you can kind of see where it's going to go. So interestingly, he has this great plan. He's cashing checks to himself, but then he dresses up as one of the secret police, the Midnighters, and breaks into Don Salvara's house and announces himself and says, "Hey, look, here's my badge. I'm with the cops. Yeah, this merchant guy, he's actually a thief. He's trying to rob you, but let him rob you, and when the time's right, we'll strike and we'll capture him and get all your money back." So he literally explains his whole plan to Don Salvara, which I question the reason for doing that, other than it's sort of stops the Don from asking too many questions because he knows it's all a scam. So if he knows it's a scam, then he can sort of go along with it being a scam. But revealing this is what gets him caught in the end. So book 2 is complications. So the Kappa, who's this sort of major underlord boss, doesn't realize the gentleman bastards what they've been doing, going out and robbing the nobles, which is a big no-no, breach of the secret peace. If he finds out about this, he would kill Locke and all his friends. But Locke, playing the part of just a regular old thief, goes and gives this guy his dues constantly and sort of is in his good graces. So the Kappa asks to meet Locke, and he says, "Look, my daughter, I want you to marry my daughter." Locke's like, "What? I don't want to marry your daughter. Your daughter doesn't want to marry me, but sure, okay. I will assent to this marriage," thinking that he'll find a way to back out of it later. Because the Kappa's in a very bad mood. There's this new guy on the block called the Grey King, and he's been murdering tons of guerristas, tons of the underworld, and it has the Kappa on edge. So he agrees to marry the daughter. That's the first complication. The second complication is the Grey King himself meets with Locke and basically forces him, says, "I know all about your schemes, your plans, your money, and everything. I'm going to get you to work for me because I need you, since you're the master of disguise, to dress up as me and meet the Kappa in person. If you don't do it, I'm going to kill you and reveal all your secrets and whatever." So Locke's forced to do this. So he's going to marry the Kappa's daughter. He also has to meet the Kappa as the Grey King while still running the game with the Salvaras. And the Grey King has a bond mage at his beck and call. One that has the falconer, he's called, because he has this falcon that's sort of he's bonded to and can control. It's a scorpion falcon too, because it's like part scorpion and it can inject venom through its talons. Anyway, so that's sort of the complications. Part 3, book 3 is a really short one. It's called Revelations. Basically, it turns out that the daughter, Kappa's daughter, gets killed by the Great King. So it sort of frees Locke from one complication. But the Kappa's like, "All right, I'm going out to meet this Great King guy, and I want you there with me, Locke, because I trust you, and I want you to give this guy what's for." And Locke's like, "Sure, yeah, I'd love to," even though Locke knows he's the one who has to dress up as the Great King to meet the Kappa. So it's a huge complication. He eventually fakes sick so that he gets out of it, dresses up as the Great King, goes down to meet them, ostensibly under the protection of the Bonds Mage, because the Bonds Mage is like, "Don't worry, I won't let these guys kill you." But they do capture him. They capture Locke as the Great King, beat the crap out of him, stuff him in a barrel full of horse urine, which is how the Kappa's daughter had been killed by the Grey King, and dump him into the sea. And they're like, "Great, we killed the Grey King, yay, let's have a huge party and invite everybody, all the criminal underworld in one place." And luckily, Bug and John were nearby, and they could free Locke and sort of revive him, so Locke didn't actually die. He survives. But when they go back to the hideout, they find the hideout's been utterly destroyed. All the money's been taken. The twins have been murdered. And while they're there, Bug gets killed. John almost dies as well through like magery. But because Locke survived, this is what the Grey King wasn't counting on. John manages to survive, but Bug gets killed. So they destroy the rest of the hideout, burn it. They burn it all to a crisp, and they're like, "Okay, we're on our own now. What are we gonna do?" And it's revealed that Locke goes undercover again and into sort of this big revel that the Kappa's having. And the Grey King shows up there and was like, "Ho ho ho! You thought you killed me, but you didn't actually kill me. Now I'm going to kill you." And it turns out a lot of the Kappa's men have actually been on the Grey King's side, and there's a coup basically, and the Kappa's children get murdered. His arm gets ripped off by a shark before he gets killed, and then the Grey King sort of takes over as the new Kappa, Kappa Raza, which Raza means vengeance. And it's revealed that his whole thing, I don't know, I think it's revealed later, but his whole thing was that his family had been murdered by the Kappa and the nobles working in concert, because his family weren't nobles, but they knew about the secret peace, which was sort of a secret thing. Obviously, it's in the name. And this couldn't get out, so they had to murder his family, even though his family were super powerful merchants. But him and his sisters had escaped and plotted their revenge. So now the twin sisters and this guy, Caparaza, are now in control of the underworld. So John's like recovering, or not John, Locke is recovering. They're trying to figure out what to do. They want to get revenge because their friends have been killed. So there's like they don't have any money. So the first thing to do is get money. And it's a really convoluted way to get money. He's like, well, I still have the Salvara game going, so I need to get money from them. But to get to them, I need to have fancy clothes, and I don't have fancy clothes. So he like goes to the bank, manages to literally talk the clothes off one of the waiters, and then uses that to get in touch with the owner of the bank, and then manages to weasel his way to get the actual bank owner's clothes on, and then goes with those clothes to meet the Salvaras and say, hey, I need money. And they're like, actually, we're all out of money. Because Doña Salvara, the lady, she went to one of the super high up nobles and told her, like, hey, the Midnighters came to us and told us that we were like supposed to go along with this guy and give him all our money and eventually we get it back, but like, I don't know, what do you think? And it turns out this woman that she's telling is the Spider, this sort of Duke's head of secret police, who's like, I control the Midnighters, and I didn't send any Midnighters to go see you in the middle of the night. This is all part of the scam. But hey, the Duke's having his yearly super party with all the nobles, so you bring this fake merchant with you, and we'll finally catch him, because he is the Thorn of Camor, the master thief that we've been trying to catch for ages, and we finally got him. So bring him to this feast, and this is where it will all end. So when Locke goes to get money from them, they're like, oh, we don't have money, but hey, come to this feast with us, and we definitely have contact there that we can borrow some money from and get you the money you need. So Locke's like, okay, fine, sure. So he goes to the party. Meanwhile, the Grey King, Caparaza, and his bondsmage go to meet the Spider and say, hey, I'm the new Kappa in town. I just wanted to make sure we still have the same deal you had with the last Kappa. Also, I really want to go to this party. And he uses the bondsmage to literally control her mind into letting him come to this party. He's like, oh, I'm also going to bring 4 statues with me. It's a gift for the Duke. Don't worry about it. So then we have the party. These 4 statues are placed on 4 different levels. John gets caught. They put him in a room with the Spider, who's an 80-year-old woman. And she poisons him and is like, I have the antidote, but you have to tell me everything and then I'll give it to you. And he's like, what? And he just like punches her in the face because she's an 80-year-old woman, takes the antidote, and jumps out the window. So he escapes. He gets back to the hideout and he's like, John, you're not going to believe this. Their new hideout. But John's on the floor writhing in pain because the bondsmage is there. He's like, oh, I didn't think you'd survive, Locke, but now I've got you. Also, John has killed the twin sisters, which they're like, it really builds them up as being super powerful fighter girls. And then John somehow takes them both out on his own, with sustaining only minor, well, I say minor injuries, he almost bleeds to death. Anyways, John's now on the ground writhing in pain, being tortured by this bondsmage. So then the bondsmage is like, oh, I'm going to make him kill you, Locke. And then he's like, no, actually, I'm going to make you, Locke, kill him. Because the Bonds Mage magic, they can control people if they know their true name. And he's like, for some reason, he doesn't think Lamora is his last name, because he's like, well, that means shadow in whatever language, so that was a made-up name. But your first name, Locke, that's definitely your real name. So I command you, Locke, kill John. So then Locke gets up, takes the axe, and like breaks the kneecaps of the mage, and it's like, that's not my real name. What are you talking about? So then that sort of frees John, and the two of them smash the mage up and kill the hawk, which, because it's connected to the mage, throws the mage all off. Then they tie him up and start cutting his fingers off, and they cut off all of his fingers and all of his thumbs. And then they're like, we're going to cut your tongue off next, because he uses his hands and his tongue to control magic. So like, we're going to cut your tongue out next. He's like, no, I'll tell you everything. So he finally tells them the whole thing about these statues that have a wraith stone in them. And the wraith stone has the ability to gentle creatures, which is basically lobotomize them. So he's going to lobotomize the entirety of the nobility at this tower. And he's like, oh, by the way, all the money that, like your fortune, it's been being sent to that plague ship, because there's been a plague ship that showed up in the bay that's been having supplies sent to it from the shore. He's like, that's all the treasure's been sent there, and he's going to escape on this plague ship. So then John's like, oh no, what am I going to do? I can either go and get the plague ship and the money and the Caparaza, or I can go north and save the nobles. And he chooses to go and save the nobles. At first I'm like, this is kind of dumb. Why would he choose that? He'd be like, I don't care if all the nobles die. That's not going to affect me. I'm getting my money back, and I'm getting my revenge. But the author sort of puts it in a way that part of his revenge is denying Raza what he wants, and he wants the nobles dead. So he's going to go save the nobles just to sort of stick it to Caparaza. So on his way out, he's like, oh, John, by the way, cut the guy's tongue out. So then John's like, okay. So they seem like they're really nice. They do murder people, but they like seem like they're nice guys, but they will torture and brutally maim and permanently disable this person because as an act of revenge. But they don't kill him, because they can't kill a bonds mage. Because if you kill a bonds mage, all 400 of the other ones in the city-state will come and utterly destroy you and your city and everyone you know, and erase you from history. So they keep him alive. So John goes back to the tower, and he's like, it's basically, there's a nuke in the casino. We have to disarm it. So after a lot of talking, they finally believe him, and they discover, oh yeah, it is full of wraith stone, this horrible stuff that lobotomizes people. What do? We can't disarm it. The only way to deal with it is, because it's lighter than air, it goes up, and also water, it doesn't work well in water. So they take all 4 of the statues up to the very top floor, and dump them in the pond. The day is saved. Locke says, look, because I've done this for you, you have to let me go. But I'll tell you where all the money is. He's like, it's on these barges full of manure heading north. But I'm going to go south and capture this Grey King guy and deal with him and get revenge. You have to let me go. And they're like, okay, you told us where the money is. You saved everybody's lives. Fine, we'll let you go. But if we ever catch you again, we'll... Like, it's classic, right? Classic sort of thief story. So then he goes and he fights Raza, and it's another thing where it's like Locke is a horrible fighter. He's not a very good swords fighter. John is the guy that fights for him, and you can see this coming a mile away. Because one of the flashbacks were when they were gang kids, Locke could never fight well. So all he would do is he like tied himself to one of the bullies once. And the bully's like, you can't win, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't have to win, I just have to hold you long enough until John gets here. And then John shows up, beats the crap out of the guy. So that's basically what happens this time, where he's like, I can't win, I just have to keep you here long enough till John gets here. And then because he's like a trickster, he like throws a coin to one side, which makes a sound over on this side. He's like, John, you're finally here, come help me. And then that distracts the guy for a split second, and then Locke actually takes the dagger and kills him himself without John's help. But I mean, Locke is like on death's door for like the 5th time in this like section. So when John finally does show up, John's like, he's very much, not very much, but he's the Sam Gamgee character. He literally, but I can carry you with Locke, and carries Locke back, and sort of revivifies him. Oh, I forgot to mention that Locke also, when he told them where the treasure was on these manure boats, he's like, "Oh, by the way, yeah, that plague ship. You gotta sink that plague ship, because that's Captain Raz's sort of fallback plans to unleash the plague on the city, because it's his plague ship." So they're like, "Oh crap!" So they, the city's set up for this. They have all kinds of catapults and fire oil and whatnot, and they sink the plague ship, which is full of the vast treasure, probably 100,000 crowns. It's like the Kappa's treasure plus John's treasure, or Locke's treasure. I keep calling him John because I'm thinking John Locke. Locke's treasure. So yeah, the epilogue is the spider and the Silvaras trying to get the treasure, and they're like, "Oh, the treasure's not here. Oh no, he tricked us. That trickster tricked us. Who would have thought?" And the spider's like, "Well, I'm going to name you my successor, you two Silvaras. You're going to be the next spider. And if he ever shows back, you'll have to deal with him." And then Locke and John get on a boat and sort of head to sea. And they're heading somewhere else because they're like, "Look, we got to get out of the city. We got to start fresh." Yeah. And the sinking of the gold was sort of, because like they had all this gold, but they didn't spend it. They to them it was just the stealing that was the thing. They didn't really want to do anything with that money. So he doesn't care about getting it back, but as sinking it, it's sort of an offering to the gods, which it's told throughout this book that when you lose someone special to you, you have to steal something great and then offer it to the gods. So him like sort of offering hundreds of thousands worth of stolen gold is like the ultimate sacrifice for offering for his dead friends. So yeah, so the only things I didn't expect, or I expected but didn't get, was Locke's father and Sabitha. So the whole time it's mentioned that there's this girl that was also one of the gentleman bastards who grew up with chains in them, and chains always had her away. She was never on scene. We only heard about her. And then in sort of the present time, it's said that she was in this different city. She left them. Her and John were, her and Locke were a thing, but it went sour. Locke's still in love with her, but she left. So I'm waiting for her to show up. When the boat showed up, the plague ship, before I knew it was a plague ship, I'm like, "Oh, finally she's here to save the day." But no. So presumably she'll be in another book. So there's a couple little hints that he's laying for future episodes, as it were. But yeah, it's just superbly written for a debut novel. It's just absolute joy to read. Very fun. Parts of it are funny. Very coherent, very realistic. Yeah, like I said, the plot, most super predictable. You could see every twist coming a mile away. You knew it was going to happen. But that's okay. It's okay to sort of have the same story that we've seen before. Yeah. Heist novel. Who doesn't love a good heist? Stealing from the rich and not giving to the poor. I love if it says, yeah, he steals from the rich, because who else would be worth stealing from? But anyways, that's enough. I've talked forever about the Lies of Lamora and its amazing alliteration. I do have the second book. I'm not going to read it right away. I'm going to take a break and read a shorter book next. But I will get to it, I'm sure. I heard that they sort of drop off in quality. The third one's out. The fourth one is forthcoming this year, I believe. I've heard the first is the best, but we'll see. I have the second one. So that's that.